Forest After Dark here with another entry in my journey through writing my novel. Second book in a cyberpunk trilogy. First book is The Glass God, link in the description below to Amazon to find it. I typically give writing advice and tips for people who are writing novels themselves, and tonight I just kind of wanted to share real quick something that is of kind of like a personal opinion of mine. Other authors might have different opinions on this, and that is perfectly acceptable. However, for me, I wanted to share that when it comes to plot in a novel, there's actually nothing wrong with having a fairly thin plot. Now, of course, you have to have just enough plot in the book that something happens in the story. You have to have something that is like, sometimes it's even just something that happens like in the third act, or maybe something happens in the first act and then something happens in the third act. You have to have at least one to two things, significant things happen, but otherwise, you can actually have a generally thin plot to tell a story if the direction that you're going in is supposed to be much more character driven. I've read tons of books that actually had really thin plots where very little actually happens. What little does happen is significant, but it's mainly supposed to be character driven. It's about the characters. It's about getting into the headspace of the main character, really getting into this character's life, his goals, his motivations, what drives him or her. And in fact, like one of the examples that I can come up with when it comes to thin plot, but pretty deep character study is The 39 Deaths of Adam Strand, which, if you don't know what that book is, it's basically like a modern day Catcher in the Rye. It's about a young man who just cares so little about life, cares so little about growing up and figuring out what he wants to do with his life, that he's tried killing himself. But every time he tries killing himself, he ends up coming back to life. The book never explains how this is, why it happens. It's just something that occurs to him every time he kills himself. He ends up coming back to life, and he could destroy his body in the process. Doesn't matter. He'll come back and his body's completely intact as if nothing happened. That's the book. I basically just gave you the entire the entire plot line of the book. There's a few things that happen near the end that shows like a semblance of forward progression for the main character that implies that, or not even necessarily implies, but shows you that his projection is not going to be the same as it's been throughout the story. However, it takes a while to get there, and by the time you do, not much happens in the story. You're reading through all these different ways in which he tried killing himself. You're reading about, Adam, the main character. You're reading about his life, his motivations, how he feels about everything. He's extremely opinionated. Sometimes it's just chapters upon chapters of his opinions and stuff like that. Now, for a lot of people, that might not be engaging enough for an entire book. It was actually really engaging to me. I've read the book several times. And admittedly, the last time I read it was so long ago, I don't know how I would feel about it now if I reread it. Maybe I won't like it as much, but I absolutely loved it at the time. So when it comes to like thin plot, rich character study, you can absolutely do something like that. I want to do something like that at some point. I want to write something that's less plot driven, more character driven, and that's ultimately what it means when we say when a story is plot driven. It is heavy on the plot, still has characters that you're supposed to care about with arcs of their own, but the plot takes center stage. Whereas when the story is character driven, maybe the plot is still pretty dense, but it's about the characters and their journey. And then, and in some cases, sometimes the plot is very thin, and it's much more about the characters. I would actually even make the argument that What Dreams May Come is another example of a story where there is like just enough plot to make a book, but it is very character driven. And that one, like this one, I actually remember like less about. Chris is the main character. He's trying to go down to hell to save his wife because his wife ended up there after killing herself, and then he died himself. And he wants to be reunited with his wife. But I basically just gave you the entire plot right there. That's the plot. Takes no time at all to explain it. And, but it's about like Chris's drive to save his wife and all of his thoughts and feelings about that. I thought that was really engaging, really, really cool. It gripped me when I first read it. I actually went through like a Richard Matheson phase for the longest time. It was a lot of fun. It was really interesting. Read stuff like I Am Legend and a collection of his short stories. Really cool. But yeah, so if you're writing a novel right now and you are the type of person who is much more invested in a character's journey without so much without too much focus on the plot, that's actually okay. You just want to make sure that there's enough semblance of plot in the story that it keeps the readers feeling like there's a reason to stay invested. And so, yeah, that's what I've got for tonight, just to telling you my personal opinion about thin plot, dense characters, totally fine. As long as you can write characters that are worth getting invested in, as long as you can write characters that are intriguing enough that people are willing to stay for that, even if the plot is light. And usually, books like those are on the shorter end, lengthwise. So yeah, that's what I've got for you guys tonight. I do this almost every night, going through my journey writing a book, but also giving writing tips and advice to people who are trying to write books yourself. I've said this in previous videos. I'm going to say it here to cap this off. If you are still struggling to get yourself to sit down and work on this novel that's in your head and it needs to go down on paper, give yourself permission to do so. Do it. Just do it. Give yourself permission to write. That is that is one of the ways that we get over the hurdle of feeling like the lack of motivation to write. You just got to give yourself permission to do so. And once you do, and you have to do it multiple times. And once you get into the pattern of doing this every day, you're going to find yourself getting a lot more done, a lot done in a faster period of time. So I hope you enjoyed this. I will be doing another entry tomorrow night. I will see you guys there.